Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. This is our presentation today on 10 ways you can make your SharePoint solutions better. I am Will Cooper. I'm a SharePoint solutions developer, and I do a lot of things in the Microsoft ecosystem. I do a lot of work with Infowise Ultimate Forms, which is what we're going to be looking at today. Additional to that, I have a YouTube channel called SharePoint Smart. So I hope you'll check that out. There's lots of cool information and videos which will show you how to do cool things in SharePoint. Also, I have a set of templates available at SharePoint dashboards, and that's something I'll talk about after our main presentation. This is a way you can make your SharePoint dashboards look really awesome. So we'll talk about that later. To tell you a little bit about Infowise, our philosophy is to make things simple and easy in terms of using our tools, and we're also always wanting to improve and make things better. Our toolkit has been around for almost 20 years, and we've been continuously improving and adding to it all during that time. Ultimate Forms is a full solution toolkit for SharePoint. It is 100% inside of your SharePoint interface once you have it added. And you do not have to be a SharePoint developer to use any of these tools or anything that I'm going to show you today. Our toolkit is a no-code solution. You don't have to do any programming in order to be able to use it. Although you guys are on mute, we definitely want your feedback. You can do that in the Q&A section in our webinar, so that's where you can post your questions. If you don't get a response right away, please be patient. I will circle back around and get to those as soon as I can. So that's how you can interact with us. And then after our presentation, if you do want to set up a web meeting, you can always schedule a demo with us, and we'll be happy to do a web meeting if that helps. Our tools are available both for SharePoint Online and also for on-premise SharePoint, or if you have SharePoint Subscription Edition, any of those versions of SharePoint, our tools are available, and you can do all the things that we're going to cover in the presentation today. So this is kind of how I think about SharePoint out of the box. It's very limited, and we want to try to think of what we can do to get out of that. There's too many limitations, and really I can't accomplish what I want in terms of SharePoint solutions if I don't have all the tools that I need. So out of the box, SharePoint doesn't give that to us. Ultimate Forms really accomplishes that for you. In the early days of SharePoint, you used to go and get different components. You get maybe some web part or something from one vendor, and you add another thing, and it was kind of ad hoc. But with our tools, it is comprehensive. It really covers all of the different kinds of situations and needs that need to have in your solution. So we'll be looking at that more today. This is your out-of-the-box standard SharePoint form, very plain vanilla, no customization options. Certainly not anything that's going to help you in terms of any type of custom process or form that you'd want in SharePoint. It's boring. So, what should our forms be? They should be dynamic. That is a key word that I come back to over and over. Dynamic forms. They are forms that need to change according to situations and rules. So that could be based on the user role. Maybe it's a manager versus a regular user, or based on a condition like the status on a help request. We need our forms to be able to adapt and change as we're interacting with them. We need to have indicators. We need to have colors and icons and visualization that helps everyone understand progress, what to pay attention to, what's important, that type of thing. So along the lines of them being dynamic, they should be adapting to the situation. It should be easy to understand what to do in your form. So it should be very focused. We don't want to, for example, hit a user with a wall of information or fields they need to fill out. So when we start a new form, we need to have just the information we need to gather and not show everything all at once at the start. Forms that are basic and don't have any extra features, they're boring. And that means your users aren't engaged and you have a system that people aren't excited to use, or worse yet, they won't use it at all. Adding in extra features and functionality is going to build some excitement, improve that engagement, and improve your user response. They need to be easy to understand. And after we set up the main form, we can add the features that I'm going to demonstrate today to improve things and create that experience, which is going to have the effect that we desire. So here we go. We're going to jump right to it. Here I am in SharePoint Online, and I'm going to go to a list I created for help requests, specifically for our IT team. Right away, we can see some things that are different from our plain vanilla SharePoint. We've got some color coding for status and progress bar indicator. We've got some edit buttons. So I'm going to demonstrate from a user perspective, first of all, and I'm going to show you at least 10 different kinds of features and functions that you can add into forms, which will make them much better. So to do that, I'm going to just put in a new request. I have a very simple form here, and I'm going to make a request related to SharePoint, and I'm going to put in a request about a SharePoint list. You see these red boxes in here. This is a setting you can use in Form Designer, and this is what I would call dynamic validation. It's going to tell real time to help the user understand if they're missing information. Okay, and you notice the red halo, if you will, the border went away immediately when I started typing. This is allowing the user to see as they're filling out the form whether they put everything in. And this is a better form of validation than letting them go all the way to the bottom of the form, hit save, and then blocking the form save because they haven't filled out required information. It lets them know as they're filling out the form whether they're doing what they need to do. Okay, we have a color-coded status. Notice that's set read-only. We don't want the person making the request to change that. The other thing is the requester filled in automatically. We want to save effort by automatically filling in information. So right now, it's a very simple form. There's actually a lot more in this form we don't see yet, and this is the dynamic forms functionality. So we have a focused user experience. That means it's going to be very easy for the user to understand what to do. They're not going to be distracted by other information that we're going to have in here. So there's my new request on the top, and we're going to go back into the form, and you're going to see that it's going to look a lot different, and that's by design. So in this case, we've got a IT support team, and they're trying to help out and respond to these requests. But we have two different parts of the form. We have the one part of the form that our user is making the request, and we want them to just fill that out. And then we've got our support team making the request. And I'll show you after I come from the user perspective how that works. And this just means that the user can see what the support team's replying. It'll be read-only for them, but the support team can interact with that part of the form. So we have kind of a dual purpose form, if you will. We've got these indicators here. So notice we've got color coding for status, which is helpful. It makes for a nicer looking dashboard to easily differentiate between where we are in progress. Our help desk team can provide some indicators. Notice the slider lets me show a progress bar to help indicate how far along are we in completing the request. We need to assign somebody to the ticket, so I'm going to fill in my name for all this. And then I've got a toggle for email updates. So this is going to automatically send out emails when there are status updates. Okay, I can just put my general notes there. And then if necessary, I can also do approvals. So let's say this was a request for an expenditure or something like that that needs extra approvals. Notice real time, I've got this form section that accordions out, and it's based on whether or not this approval required is toggled on. We'll come to that in a minute, but this is part of the dynamic functionality. Another thing we might like to do is do some logging. In a plain SharePoint form, typically it'll show you what the current state is, but it's not showing you in the form what's the history, what are the steps that got us to this point. You know, when was the last response, who made updates, that type of thing. And this history logging can really help a lot with that. So I've got these dynamic buttons in the form that can perform updates in the form real time. So it date timestamps with my name, and then it puts in the notes that I put in that log history field. Okay, so now we've got our support team responding back. They have their own form section, and they can make their own updates, which is just going to be accessible to them. Now for the approvers, we can do conditional rules which control who can do the approval. So I'm just using my name here just so I can access everything. And when these approval buttons get clicked, it's going to automatically update that approval field. And it'll also append to that history log because that's part of the logging that we would like to see. And this is all happening immediate, real time. I don't have to wait a minute and a half for a Power Automate workflow to run. It's instantaneous. Everything's happening responsively, real time in the form. Notice the append to the log. It says Approver 1 Will Cooper approved. And there's the approval note. So we've got some dynamic functionality, and this approval section will only show in the situation that I need to do that. Another thing we might like to do that is not a part of SharePoint at all is printing. In some situations, maybe we have a employee onboarding system or we have a timesheet system. In these cases, we'd like to have a PDF output of what's in the form. How are you going to do that in SharePoint? As I say, in regular SharePoint, there is no printing capability at all. So these tools are going to add that for you. In this case, I've got a print template function. I can just check next to the item, and in the command bar, I've got extra options here because I have Ultimate Forms. I can just click on print. It'll show me a print preview, and this is all the information from the form. I can just click PDF. That is going to go ahead and immediately download a PDF to my computer. And it's exactly what you'd expect. There's a PDF of all the content from the form. So this is a very useful extra feature, including these tools, that's helping you get some dynamic functionality. With all of these kind of forms, email notifications are always going to come into play. Again, if you're having to try to do this without the box, you might have to set up a Power Automate workflow. It's a bit time consuming. Not the most user-friendly experience, and you may have to do some coding to get the content of the email to look how you want. With Ultimate Forms, you simply in SharePoint can go to our alerts function and set up trigger rules to send emails automatically according to conditions. So I already set one up. Every time there's a status update, I want the email to go out, and it's easy to understand. You could just about teach yourself how to do this. You define the recipients. I can refer to the form fields, maybe the requester, for example, or you can explicitly put in names. You can define who it's coming from. And then the trigger condition. In my case, I want an email to go out if that email updates checkbox is on and whenever the status is updated. And what it is, I want an email to go out. And I can go into this visual editor tool and I can make it look however I want. I can use the rich text editor and change the size or shading, whatever I want this to look like. And in there, it's automatically going to include a link that users can just click on to go directly to the form. So they don't have to go digging around to find that request. I can define all my email rules right here in SharePoint. So very easy to do. So how is this dynamic functionality set up? Because this looks nice, but depending on the approach you're using, you may think that it would be very difficult to create this kind of rule. Our form designer tool is where this is built. This is a drag and drop style interface. And once again, I cannot emphasize enough, this is a no-code tool. You do not have to do programming. It's all through a visual interface. To set up your form, you can put in these containers, and I can do things like drag form fields out onto the form and control how many columns I want for that section. So you can see I've adjusted the number of columns for this top section to make it look how I want. And then I can adjust the look and feel very easily as well. If I wanted to highlight this section, I could just add a background color and click a couple buttons, and what you see is what you get. Once I've made the changes the way I want, I can just click the publish button, and it's going to go ahead and publish real time for me. Then I also have these connected lookups. Those are handy. You can do a cascading lookup. In my case, I have categories and subcategories which are linked together. This is using a special functionality with Ultimate Forms, which is connected lookup. That's what it's referred to as. And let's look at how I was able to make this support team function show or hide conditionally. So I've got a rule here, and I said that I want this section writable only on the edit and display. I just had to click that radio button and uncheck the new box, and it made it so that this doesn't unnecessarily display on the new form. I don't want the person making the request to have to see that. I can define rules based on the group. So if I wanted it to just be the IT team, I could say, write if IT team, and I could define a SharePoint security group, or I could just put in names if I want to, and it'll make it so this rule only applies for the people in that group. So by adding these rules to these containers, I can show and hide sections conditionally. That's based on the user role. I also had that situation where I wanted it to do that based on a condition. In my form, I have a field approval required, and I only want this approval section to appear if that's true. Very easy to set that up. I simply set a permissions rule and said write if the approval required field is yes. No coding, very simple to understand. By adding that one rule, it makes this section pop in and out of view. So that dynamic functionality is really handy. Another thing that's really handy that I didn't show to you yet is the idea of a repeating table. It's very often in the case in forms that you need to be able to add multiple items in line inside of the form. And in my help request system, I added a tasks list so that for a more sophisticated request that requires a lot of things to happen, we wanted to have an ability for the support team to create tasks related to this user request. So in here, I have this connected to another SharePoint list, and this is a secondary form. Okay, so just simple task concepts. I'm going to assign this to myself. We need to know when this is due, so I just pick it from the date picker, and I can put some notes here. And now I've got these line items appearing in a repeating table. If I want to do another task, I can just do another form. I'm just doing some silly stuff here just to move quickly. And there's no limit. I can keep adding items, and now you have a many-to-one relationship. This scenario comes up all the time. It could be on a purchase order request where you have line item expenditures. It might be the timesheet scenario I referenced earlier, where you need to have multiple time entries per timesheet. This repeating table will let you set that up. This isn't possible with out-of-the-box SharePoint. There's no way to pull that off. And you can do this all through the design interface. So that's very convenient. Everything you can do is from this menu. If I wanted to do the associated items, that's configured in this area. That's how I was able to set up the tasks. And I can make tweaks to it as far as how it appears to the user if I need to. If I want to have those visual indicators like I did for the status, notice I can assign my colors here. didn't have to do any code or fancy adjustments. I could just come into the configuration for this, and I can pick whichever colors I want for those different statuses, and that's all there is to it. That progress indicator, that's our indicator field, and also very simple. All I had to do is say, hey, I want this to display according to the value in this other field called progress. It's going to have values from 0 to 10. I want it green, and show me the values as a percentage. That's all that I had to do. And with those few steps, I'm able to get this nice looking dashboard, which gives me visual information, which helps me understand at a high level where things stand. That repeating table, I don't have to go to the form to get to it. I can just click on tasks and accordion that out by just clicking on the links, and I can directly access those if I need to. So I could directly open up those task forms and update that. So there's a lot of possibilities in terms of what can be done. Let me check on your comments, and if you guys have any questions, please go right ahead and put them in the Q&A section in the chat. All right, so there's a question about people outside the organization. I'm so glad you asked about that. There is a public-facing forms feature that's a part of our product, and the way you can get to that is by going into Form Designer, and in the upper right corner, there's a link that says External Form. By default, that's turned off. If you want to do a public-facing form, you can. In fact, I use that myself on my own site. So I'll take you over to SharePoint Dashboards. If you go to my contact form at sharepointdashboards.com, this is a form built in SharePoint and exposed on a public website. So you can see some of the dynamic form functionality here. And then depending on what people ask, it's going to accordion out and do different sections. So there you go. It is very much possible to do an external form. So they will not come directly into your SharePoint site. They may go to a public site if you wish to have your form embedded there. If you don't want to do that, you can still do a public form. It will provide you a URL that'll have Infowise in it. So great question. It gave me a chance to highlight something that is a really handy feature. All right, let's see another question. I like the questions you guys are giving me because you're letting me highlight features. Okay. In terms of doing languages, there's a couple capabilities that you can tap into. First of all, we do provide a translations feature that's part of our product. You can click into the fields and add labels. So there's this translations function. If you click on this globe icon, it allows you to add different languages. Now, when using that, you would go ahead and use the translation tool and then just copy and paste those translations in there. And then depending on the user's locale, it's automatically going to shift the form into that language. Another possibility you can do, we do have an AI rewrite function, which is very interesting. I really encourage you to try that out. And this function can be used to do translations into other languages too. So if you're interested in facilitating users with different languages in your forms, you have a lot of functionality that you can tap into. Great question. Thank you, Mike. Yes, you can certainly do calculations in the form. There's a lot of possibilities. Nikki asked about that. So if you want to do auto totaling and that repeating table, you've got all kinds of functions for that. I use that capability in another one of my public-facing forms. So I'll just show you that real quick. If I go into this purchase form, notice this is another SharePoint form. I built it using Ultimate Forms. And when I change the license count, notice that the information here is changing. And notice also that the form changes depending on different options that I pick. So absolutely, you can do that. Good questions from you guys today. Can users reply to email updates directly via Outlook, and will this update the log? You can set up that type of functionality. You would need to set up an action. That's part of our product. So that's another thing that I didn't highlight just yet. You can use our actions capability to do all kinds of things in SharePoint. And just like email alerts, this is based on trigger conditions. So you can do things like interrogate the email for certain responses and do things like a status update. Most typically, you just provide a link in the email, and when you click the link, that takes the user directly to the form. And that is typically the easiest kind of thing to set up, but it is possible to do what you describe. Good question, Simon. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how you can try this out. The most important thing you could do if you're interested in some of the things I showed you today is try it for yourself. And that's the most fun thing to do. To get our product, you can get a trial, which is the whole software with no limit, by just going to the InfowiseSolutions.com site. Click Try Now for free, and you can click on Install Now. Or if you're not your SharePoint admin, or there's going to take time to do that, you can also sign up for the online trial, which will just give you access on our Infowise site. By doing this, you can actually start downloading templates or trying out forms and start playing around with this to see how everything works. One very cool aspect to our toolkit is we have hundreds of pre-built solutions available in the solution catalog. So once you have that trial software installed, you can just go to the solution catalog and download it. I hadn't told you guys, but I am actually going to upload this template. It'll be available within the next couple of hours on this Infowise webinars page. You can just click on this and you just click on install. It'll download it directly to your SharePoint, and you can put it in a practice site and play around with it. Very cool. So there's lots and lots of really great solutions that you can browse to in the solutions catalog. Another thing I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, maybe you want to talk to us. You have a very specific project that you need to get done. There's some specific requirements about what you need to accomplish, and you want to meet with us one-on-one to address those questions. We're happy to talk to you. If you go to the Infowise site, just scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there's a book a demo option. And if you do that, it'll send us an email, and we'll schedule a web meeting with you, and we'll talk about your project and answer the specific questions about what you want to do in your SharePoint project. So that's something you can check out. So that pretty much concludes what I was going to tell you about the Ultimate Forms options to make better SharePoint solutions. I'm going to pause for a second, see if you guys have more questions about that. And then we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about SharePoint dashboards. Great questions today. Appreciate that. I see somebody's got their hand up in chat. Just go ahead and post your questions into the Q&A section if you have any questions for me. All right, you can keep those questions coming about Ultimate Forms. Again, the best thing to do is to download the free trial, and you can use our entire software for free for 30 days and start doing some practice forms. Lots of information on the Ultimate Forms site. If you go under resources, we have tutorials. I recommend that you start by doing the Kickstart training. There's a step-by-step instructions that'll tell you how to do your very first form, so you don't feel like you're flying blind. You can go through that training. We've got tutorials in there, and then lots and lots of information past that if you end up getting the software and want to learn about all of its capabilities. All right, let's talk now about SharePoint dashboards. This is a separate companion tool that you could use in addition to Ultimate Forms. And this is about making nice looking SharePoint dashboards. I mentioned visual indicators and progress indicators, and those are things that help you to build a better SharePoint solution. This site has, as of now, 217 different templates that you can apply on your SharePoint views. It could either be to format the whole view, or it could be just to do things like add an edit button or add indicators on to your SharePoint views. It's very easy to use. This does not require any software installation at all. You simply copy and paste templates into your SharePoint environment. As with Ultimate Forms, you can try this software first to learn how it works and get a little more experience before making a decision about whether you want to go for a subscription. The free sign up will give you 21 free templates. There are lots of things that you can try with that. And then if you do go on to sign up for a subscription, that will allow you to access all of the templates. And there are quite a few that are there. So whether you want buttons to perform special actions, you want to do some special progress indicator, or you want to format your views in particular ways, or do charting. There are lots and lots of different options in terms of what you can do. Very easy to sign up. All you got to do is provide your name and email. You get a free login, and then you can use those 21 templates, unlimited use, as much as you like. So a very cool thing you can tap into to make your SharePoint sites look a lot nicer and gain some extra functionality. And you can use this in addition to Ultimate Forms to help build out your awesome SharePoint solutions. So that's mostly what I wanted to tell you about SharePoint dashboards. Let me see. I've got another question in here. There is a SLA for support both for Ultimate Forms and for SharePoint dashboards. So if you go into the site under our technical documentation, you can find that. The first thing to do would be to download the software. When you get a quote, we can get you more technical information in terms of how support works. Typically, that's going to be email-based support. So you're going to put in a support request through email, provide your information, and you're going to get a response back to help you if you have an issue. That's part of what you're paying for in both of these software options. There's a question about calendar. That's something I didn't show. It's outside of the scope of today's presentation, but Ultimate Forms does provide a custom calendar web part, which is very handy. And yes, you certainly can add email reminders to your calendar list. That's absolutely possible. There's a question about services. I'm glad you asked that. In both cases, these are software packages you can sign up for. Services are not provided directly as part of SharePoint dashboards or the Ultimate Forms. However, we have what you would call a partner model. We have many different partners that are certified on Ultimate Forms. And if you go into our site and click on partners, you can find information about our partners and find somebody near you that would be able to help you to build out solutions if you would like to get some extra support. So in terms of services, that would be your best bet, is to go to resources and click on partners to get more information there. Yes, in terms of the email automation, it's fully dynamic. You can pick the sender. You can specify the email address. Sending, in fact, with most of the customers that I work with, that is exactly what we would do. So just to go back to our email alerts, if I go into my alert, I can reconfigure the sender to whoever I want. So typically that might be a no reply email address in your organization. Absolutely, you can do that. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to stay in the meeting to answer questions on chat for a few minutes, but I really appreciate everybody coming today. I hope this gave you some ideas, and we'll go ahead and pause the recording now.